Hey, folks, I believe that this episode is for you if you're a boomer, if you're a male boomer in particular, because I want you to feel uplifted. I want you to feel appreciated, but I want you to also know that you are a part of the problem as well as we understand the solution. I've gone through a lot of things my own self with my own family, and that's why I'm no different and no better than any one of you that are watching or listening to this broadcast of this episode. So, again, if any of that makes sense to you, this episode is for you because we're going to look at men today versus men of yesterday. I'm talking about the everyday man, I'm talking about the family man, and how standards or how things have changed overall. And I think it's really important because in many cases, it simply gets overlooked. So let's get started. I am Sir Charles Carey, formerly known as a peak performance strategist, content creator, and songwriter. But we have shifted, and it's not so much about where we have shifted, because today our focus is peak performance, but in the healthcare focus. But as it relates to healthcare, you got to think about what is healthcare. It's not just all medicine and broken bones. It's also mindset, psychology, the emotional intelligence, things of that nature. And this is why today's topic is so important for men, because I believe with all that I know, because I am a man, that our feelings, our thoughts, our expectations, our desires in so many ways have been suppressed. So I want to start off just by making some comparisons to the men or fathers of yesteryear with the men and the fathers of today. Now, I'll say this honestly to start off. I believe that many men deserve the bad rap that they've given. There may be reasons for why they have gone through the things they've gone through, and I get that. There are reasons, but a lot of times there have been excuses as well. And amidst the reasons and the excuses, there has been misunderstanding or miscommunication. And unfortunately, that has impacted the entire family dynamic, in addition to several other components. When I say several other components, I'm talking about best practices, changing times, expectations, the rise and fall of policies and procedures, influences of a technology, if you will. However, at its core, because as simplistic as it can be, then we can broaden out into other areas. But at its core, we are all responsible for the decisions we've made. And unfortunately, some of us make decisions that are irreversible. I know in my own personal life, I've made decisions that have been irreversible, that have impacted all my children. And I cannot tell you from the depths of my heart how I guess I could say, or should say, I wish some of those things were different. But at the same time, if many of those things were different, would I be even making this broadcast? Would this episode be something that would be in my purview? And, is it something that would be a part of my life? All of my experiences, milestones, or whatever, beyond a certain point or after a certain point, would they be relevant? And would they be messages that I would be sharing? And you see, that, how can I say it simply? That's where the rubber meets the road. I think sometimes the hardships that we experience, those actual hardships are the very things that make a difference in our outcome. It's all about the journey, not the destination. So had I not had any trials, any hurdles, any tribulations, would this message be coming from this individual? And I don't know, because I had to have those trials, and I had to have them because of the decisions I've made. And that's something us men have to come to terms with. And as that is concerned, it does not matter whether you're a boomer or any other generation. When we all make decisions, there are consequences. And those consequences, more than likely, will impact someone or other people in general, and that's possibly across the board. So we have to see that. You see, the old school men, they were more blue collar, hands on. They either worked as laborers, they worked in the field, they did something that was, I guess, less appealing. The optics were not the way things are today. And today, if you look at men and how men move in society, we're definitely across the board. And I don't mean that it just happened all of a sudden. This has been happening for some time. And even way back in the older days, when I'm talking about men working in the fields, all men did not work in the field. There are many men that worked in a quote unquote business setting. But today specifically, we have probably more men than ever that are doing white collar or business oriented work than ever before. And when I say business, it's not to diminish a person that works in a gas station or in a mechanic shop, or that's an HVAC person, or that's a plumber, or that's an electrician or carpenter. Those are businesses also. But I'm talking about blue collar versus white collar. And because of technology, many of us are willing to use our minds more than our labor, more than our physique to get the job done. Although a trade is still very viable and very needed today. And for those that are not college people that are coming up, if you're not in my generation and you don't feel that you're college bound, it's understandable. And not only is it understandable, but it's also commendable that you possibly work in a trade. And why would you do that? Because maybe that's more suitable for your skill set, your mindset, your interest, and something that you can carry long term. Everyone isn't designed for college, and everyone isn't designed for the same set of circumstances just because that's trendy or that's a fad. So, again, when you look at the big scheme of things, a laborer as a father or as a man in general versus today dealing with tech and white collar work, there are stark differences. They're on two different ends of the spectrum, and there's nothing wrong with any of those things. But the truth of the matter is, or as we continue to move forward, there are a lot of other differences. And again, it does impact us. So let's look at back in the day, men didn't quote unquote raise the children. I mean, they did, generally speaking, but that was normally a task. And I don't even know if it was verbalized because I was a kid. I don't know if it was verbalized, but the mothers took care of the home. They were the homemakers, whether they worked or not, whether they did babysitting or not, whether they cared for their parents or not. The mothers reared the children. They were more hands-on with the children. And the fathers, again, did that outside of the homework or blue collar work. And they were, quote unquote, the breadwinners. They came home and provided, right? And the mother kept the household up. That was the old school method. Of course, until the women's lib generation or era, when women started becoming more employed. Now, I do know that, yes, during the war times that women were waxing with the USO and they did all sorts of jobs to help when the United States was at war with other nations. I do know that. And that probably or possibly helped to spurn decades later the women's lib era. Now, I can't say that it definitely did, but it seemed to be a crack or a foothold in the beginning of something that would continue to change because of the independence, because of the ability for a woman to have her own. So that was back then. Now, if you look at things, fathers are still the ones that, are supposed to, if they're in the home, are supposed to or expected to provide. But because of the women's lib era, a lot of times fathers and mothers equally take care of the home, yet the mothers still sort of do the child rearing, right? And maybe even the correcting of the children. A lot of times you'll find that that's something that is, I guess, an expectation of the moms. So the dads would fix things when they came home around the house. They would come in. Of course, the mom or the wife would have their food, whatever, and the dad would wash, rinse, and repeat the same behavior. Go to work, bring home the bacon, maybe help with the gardening, and depending if you have property, fix the washing machine or fix things in the house, and maybe even do the correcting. If mom felt, excuse me, if the mother felt that the child needed correcting or whatever the case may be, or a talking to, well, the dad was expected to be the one to correct the child, depending on what was going on. Now, when you look at things now, I guess you could say that things kind of changed somewhat, and they changed in the sense that a lot of these duties, a lot of these household lifestyles, I'll say, are equally shared. Again, if the father is in the house. Now, if the father is not in the house, unfortunately, the mother in many cases takes on the role of the mom and the dad. And we all know that there may be many children that have been raised by their mothers only, male and female children, but it's not the same, and it does not provide the balance of a boy seeing by example or being raised with a father in the home. And more, unfortunately, families seem to be divided. Divorce rates are much higher, which creates more imbalance, which lends itself to more potential dysfunction. Now, there was no guarantee that if the father was in the house, that there would not be dysfunction. But let's be honest with ourselves. If the father was in the home, talking about old school, there was probably more of a balance. The children, male or female children, got to see things from dual perspectives, not just one, not just a feminine touch. A feminine touch is one thing, a masculine touch is another. And it's not to say that the men are always going to be aggressive with the children, but it's to say that there are benefits from both styles, from a kinder or softer style, as well as a firm and more assertive style, especially when it comes to your parents being the ones to tell you, to teach you, to instruct you, and to inform you. And that's the long and short of it. Dads were normally going to give the punishments, where a mother's punishment might be just a talking to. Now, I'm not saying that children needed to have physical correction, but in some cases it was fine, and it worked out fine in many cases. We're living in a different time today. So let's look at things in a balanced way, or as balanced as possible. And when you look at the big scheme of things, ask yourself, what way was I raised? Ask yourself, how do I raise my children? Ask yourself how involved you were. Were you in the home? Were you not in the home? If you were not in the home, were you able to make amends? Did that help? Do you see some breakdown in your family dynamic within your children, male or female? Do you see that maybe by how things played out as your children were growing up, whether you were in the home or not in the home, that there were things that could have been done differently? And you see, I have something I call being open, honest, clear, and direct. I wrote it in my book. I believe it was Aligned by Design. And in the book, I talk about the importance of being open, honest, clear, and direct. And the reason for that is because when you are open, there's no hidden agenda. When you all are honest, you don't have to remember to retell the story. And when you are clear, it allows things to be easily understood and digested. And if you are direct, again, you're setting that example, because these people, talking about your children, male or female, they deserve the opportunity of going out in the world, or being prepared to go out in the world with the right mindset. You know, again, that's another catchphrase. The right mindset is all you need, right? But that's critical because if you really care about your children, which I think most of us do, you want to prepare them as best as possible. And you cannot prepare your children as best as possible if you're not open and honest with them. Of course, age appropriate, but you have to prepare them. You want them to understand what the world is about, what the world, how the world will view them, and possibly some of the obstacles that may be in their way when they are ready to live life on life's terms. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. As they are ready to live life on life's terms, there will be challenges. And knowing that there will be challenges, you should prepare your children as best as possible. Now, you know, it seems to me, again, back in the old days, I'm talking about the differences. Fathers today versus fathers of yesterday, right? What is the role you play, right? That's the name of this. What's my role? Today's man. Fathers of yesterday, in some cases, seem to be removed of dealing with their daughters. I'm not saying that they didn't deal with them or didn't interact with them, but the mother was more like the nurturer of the girls. And I'm not saying the mothers did not care about their sons, but the women dealt with the girls and the men dealt with the boys. So the father might take his son to work. The father may go out in the backyard and show his son the engine in the car, or tell him about yard work or things like that, or just fixing up the fence post or things of that nature, where the girls did the opposite, right? The women did the opposite. They did more feminine things, and the men did more masculine or hands-on things. And again, there's nothing wrong with that, but people did what they thought was best at that time. As Maya Angelou says, when you know better, you do better. So even though I may have seen those types of things and wondered, you know, why mom would maybe talk to my sister about this and that, maybe she was talking about the feminine hygiene. Maybe she was talking about when women go on their periods and things like that. Now, it's not that I'm not going to eventually know, but I don't need to know about a girl's hygiene. So in many cases, it makes sense that the mothers dealt with the girls and the fathers, the men dealt with their sons. Now, I'm not sharing something that maybe you don't know, but sometimes we have to have perspective, especially if or when your children grow up and you have challenges. They don't understand this. They don't understand that. But they have, see, here, when I talk about being open, honest, clear, and direct, that gives your children the opportunity, again, to really be prepared for life on life's terms. Now, if there's something about their character, their personality, or their temperament that they don't embrace it, no, it's not your fault. And no, you should not be blamed for it. But the only thing you can do at whatever age or whatever stage in your relationship is to try and make sense of it. Now, a broken family or a dysfunctional family, or dysfunctional and broken, that could be a huge task. And when I say huge, I mean astronomically huge. Why? Because there are different influences that impact all of us. And there's nothing like influencing a young mind or a younger mind as it goes out into the world. And a lot of times you may find that a lot of children, secretly or quietly, they've always wanted their parents to be together. What's wrong with that? Not a daggone thing. But if the open, honest, clear, and direct approach has been implemented, there's always the opportunity that hopefully they can have some understanding if things are not better within a broken and dysfunctional family. So again, you know, fathers are not mothers. A man's role in the family dynamic is not going to be like a woman's role. Again, women have a kinder discipline, usually a softer approach on the family or within the family dynamic, where a lot of men have the opposite. Now, again, dads aren't wrong, but it's helpful for a dad to have a balance of his assertive and maybe aggressive self. And it's good that a mom may be softer and kinder, but that she has firmer approaches at some point. Because again, balance is needed not just in the household, man, woman, but how the man or the woman disseminate how they raise their children to go out in the world. That is, to me, of course, it would be a perfect scenario, but we're not perfect, and we're not dealing with scenarios that are just the ideal scenario, period. I mean, no one has this perfect upbringing. I remember as a young man, maybe in my early 20s, I was able to tell my parents about things they did with me and to me that they were inaccurate about. And then when I told them very openly. I kind of felt sorry for them, but I know that I needed to tell them because, yeah, they did the best that they did, but it bothered me that they did things that I knew were inaccurate. Prime example, once I remember as a young person, I was always steadfast at learning. I knew how to price compare when going to stores. I was a good kid to go to the store and get a greeting card. So they would send me sometimes to the drugstore, to the grocery store, to the corner store, and maybe go and get a greeting card for whatever event. Or if they liked a certain food from the fruit stand, that's when we had fruit stands separate from other food locations. Sometimes I would go to 2 or 3 maybe different stores. This is the money in the pocket for the grocery store, and this other pocket maybe was the money for the drugstore, and then maybe another pocket to give them. Pocket had a note to give the man behind the counter to get something for mom, or he would maybe secretly wrap up beer and put it in a bag and let me take it up, right? So I'm going to 2 and 3 different stores. So on this one particular occasion, I go to the store and they're doing the math, and I'm like, okay, I'm back from the store. And they asked me, where's the rest of the money? And I'm thinking, what money? And I had $5 in my back pocket that I did not use. Didn't realize it. So what happened? I get my hind parts tore up for stealing. Folks, I was not stealing. I didn't know the money was there. I did not remember because I'm going to various stores. I'm walking up 5 flights of stairs with a shopping cart. And honestly, because again, at a young age, I was did good price comparisons. I saved money on the things I got from the store. Meanwhile, they were upstairs with my aunts and uncles and my cousins, but I'm the one going to the store. I get embarrassed in front of my cousins and my aunts and uncles, and I'm promised to get my hind parts tore up, plus to be put on punishment for stealing. And I did not steal. So I told them about this as a young man in my mid-20s. And as I told them about the story, they both looked at me like not deer in headlights, like deer that didn't want to look at the headlights. Their heads went down and they felt so saddened and ashamed. And I definitely understood what that look was about. But the point still remained that they were wrong. Period. They were simply wrong for how they looked at me and what they thought that I was doing. And I wasn't doing anything wrong. I wasn't intentionally taking money. And I had to live with that until I was able to tell them. They didn't want to hear from me when I was a kid because what? I'm lying because I want to get away with taking $5 for bubble gum and candy and maybe a G.I. Joe or something. Come on. So my point of saying all that and sharing that story was just to say that it's important to be open, honest, clear, and direct. And when you look at the past to how things are done today, there is a grave difference. And sometimes the miscommunication or the misunderstanding in whatever way, it may not be that easy to iron it out, but we want to. We really want to, and we should. But if you cannot do that, you should not be walking around with guilt. And again, men are not like women. Our way of loving and caring is not the same way a mother or a woman would love and care. You know, there's so many moms that are really not loving, and there's so many fathers that are very emotional. I know I'm a very emotional man. I've always been. I've always told my children how much I love them and how much I care for them, even if I'm not able to provide or wasn't able to provide for them when I was younger, especially knowing that I had a dark past. I was a substance abuser, but I always wanted them to know how much I cared for them. So again, if this message rings home with you, if you've had any trials, whether it's from the perspective of being a parent that was separated from his family, a parent that was on substance abuse, your children were maybe torn in one direction or another direction. I just heard something. So my point still is, regardless of what you may have heard or thought, if there's problems in your family dynamic, you can't create miracles, but you can try to mend things. But when we cannot mend things, the only thing we can do is do the best that we can to be the best versions of ourselves. And if you felt that you could relate to this message, or you had different viewpoints about this message, I'd love to hear what you thought and what your questions were. If you agree, disagree, please post it and let's have a conversation about it. And as I always say, you've got to be willing to radiate the brain and change the game. No matter what, no matter how, it makes a big difference. Just be honest with yourself about who you are, how you are, and what your goals are, and fix things if you can. And if you can't, you got to come to terms with accepting it and to keep moving forward. Have a great day.